Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Cameron Sanchez. I am the State Senate reporter for the Arizona Capitol Times, and I will be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have contested primary election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and House may be participating in the debate tonight. When voting in a primary election, voters are choosing between candidates of the same political party, so their preferred nominee may advance to the general election. As a moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents, although in this case, we only have one candidate. The questions that I will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capitol Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News, and Saharita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voter. So, voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by email at debates@kc-a.com, text at 480-808-1814, or by phone at 480-937-1253. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. Candidates running for the state Senate are Warren Peterson, unopposed. Candidates running for the state House are Suzanne Lunt, Travis Grantham, Lauren Hendricks, and Natalie DiBernardo, also Democrat Brandy Reese. Ms. Lunt, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Sure will. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. It's my pleasure to get to know you a little bit better. My name is Suzanne Lunt, and I'll just let you know a little bit about myself. I've grown up in Arizona, in Tempe, and I've lived in Gilbert for over 30 years with my husband, and this is where we've raised our 4 kids. We love being in Gilbert, and for that reason, we've been really involved in the community and in volunteering. I've served on the Gilbert Sister Cities board as president and as a board member for over 20 years. And that's a great organization that helps bring the world together one friendship at a time. Another way that I've been volunteering recently is I've been on the community task force. I know I'm not saying that right. The community engagement task force for the town of Gilbert. And this is a task force that helps look at different issues that citizens of Gilbert may have, and we try to study it out and make recommendations to the town of Gilbert. So that's another way that I've been involved in the town. Also in our church and neighborhood communities. Right now I actually volunteer as our church chorister for the choir. So that's one interesting thing about me. Anyway, I'm just anxious to serve and give back to the community that has served us so well.
Great, thank you so much. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you got on this track and what made you want to run for political office?
Well, the reason why I'd like to run for political office, I'm not a politician, I'm a teacher, and I've been a kindergarten teacher for years. And there's a book that's called something like Everything You Ever Needed to Know You Learned in Kindergarten. And as I've noticed the partisanship and the way that people can't get along in our legislature and in the current tone of our politics, it's made me think that we can be a little bit more kind and civil and working together, kind of like how we learn in kindergarten. And I'd like to bring that to Arizona politics. I'm also, of course, really interested in how Arizona education is supported. And I'd like to make sure that we have a booming economy in Arizona, along with other issues like water rights and our environment. I'd like to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So that's why I'm running.
Awesome. Let's talk about Gilbert and that district, because District 14 is fairly large and fairly important. What are some of the priorities of Gilbert's residents?
Well, I feel like the priorities that I'm focusing on, I feel like are ones that are concerns to our constituents. Education, we want to make sure that we have proper funding for education. We want to make sure that we can attract and retain excellent teachers. We want to do the best things for our upcoming generation, and that is a big concern for our family-oriented Gilbert. Also, I think it goes right along with it that with education, we can build a better workforce and we can boost our economy by having people who are well educated. And then finally, we want to live in a place that is sustainable. We want to make sure that we have a great environment and that we have the water that can sustain our area. One thing about that is I've noticed that Gilbert is really a shining star in water conservation and making sure that we're all set with that. Gilbert has they have a system for making sure that we have recycled water, and they have aquifers that keep that. We have a 100-year plan, making sure that we're all set. Also, I know there's a big concern about the Colorado River and that we're going to need to start restricting water use. As I spoke to one expert in Gilbert about water issues, he said that the majority of our water comes from the Verde and Salt rivers. And while I'm sure that we need to be careful with that water also, it's not all of our water that's coming from the Colorado River. We need to work together to make sure that we can work with our neighboring states and neighboring areas so that everybody has access to water.
Great. I think those are definitely priorities we've heard about a lot over the course of this session.
Yes.
I'm going to give you a question now that's coming from a viewer.
Okay.
Our commercial company in Gilbert needs more trained workers. How can we improve trade school and vocation education in Arizona to grow the pool of available employees?
Okay, I think I heard your question that you were cutting out just a little bit, but I think I can answer this. We are looking for more qualified workers for this person's business, it sounds like, in Gilbert. And one way that we can do that is to make sure that with our education that we're helping our kids to not only learn just the facts and memorize things, but education is changing a little bit. And as an instructional coach, I'm helping teachers learn how to help their students to think deeply and to solve problems and to collaborate with others. And I think that we can all agree that employers are looking for people who have those skills. And so that's one way that I'm personally working at that, and hope that we can promote that throughout our state. Also, I believe that it's crucial that we fund our community colleges and also make sure that trade schools are available. Not everybody has the career path of going to our state universities or other universities, and we need to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be educated in some kind of a trade or some kind of a skill where they can provide for their families. And so that's something that I would really support.
Great. I hope you can hear me now. This is another question coming from a viewer.
Okay.
What specifically are some things that the state of Arizona can do to improve our public education system?
Ooh, well, I could really talk about education a lot being a teacher. There are a few things that we can do that would help all schools. The first is in our budget. One of the biggest jobs for legislators is to come up with a budget, and schools are a big part of that. In our budget right now, we are slated to give schools a 2% inflation increase. And as we know that our inflation is a lot higher than that right now. And in Maricopa County, in our area, it's closer to 11%. So I would definitely like to see more than 2% being given to our schools for that inflation rate. Another thing that we can do to help our schools is kindergarten is not fully funded. Kindergarten is only funded for half-day kindergarten, but almost every kindergarten is full day due to the academic demands that we have for our kids. And so if we were really going to help our schools, we would fund for full day kindergarten. As I've taught kindergarten, I've had large class sizes and requested help through paraprofessionals. As I've reached out to my school board, who's trying to do the best that they can with the funds that they're given, they've said, we can't give you more help through paraprofessionals until we have kindergarten funded full time, full day, have the funds for each student for a full day. So that is definitely one way that we can help all schools, is giving that complete funding. And the last thing that I've learned is that our special education is not fully funded in Gilbert. We each year, as Gilbert sets its budget, it comes about $30 million short of funding those needs of our special education students. And so when you do that, that means you've got to take here and there from the things that would go to our typical students. And so if we want to give the very best, we've got to make sure that those programs, our kids who are most in need, are fully funded.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about ESAs, which are education scholarship accounts. They're also called vouchers sometimes, depending on the person or the political party. Do you support a universal ESA expansion?
I really don't. I think that it's important to have choices, but when the taxpayers when we're using their dollars to support private institutions, I don't think that that's the correct use of the funds. As I've thought about this, I've thought there's no way of regulating how much tuition is going to be at those schools, and we just get a certain amount for our students that could go to those vouchers. And so it leaves the kids who are the most needy not being able to afford it, even though they have that voucher. So it makes just a further division of students, that those who can afford it do have that choice. Those who cannot afford it don't have a choice at all. So I don't think that it's really solving our problems there. I do think that I know we have vouchers now for those who have special needs, and there are certain schools that are just fabulous for that. But I think to make it universal is going to just expand the haves and the have-nots. It's going to make things more divisive for our students.
Okay. Another big buzzword that we've been hearing a lot in the education conversation is CRT, or critical race theory. How would you define that, and do you think that's an important issue to focus on?
Well, as I understand it, critical race theory is looking at past events and making people feel maybe shamed for how their ancestors have acted in certain cases. And so, of course, I would not support that in our schools. I would support looking at our history and learning about it, and knowing that we can do a job of not repeating some of our history. And I think it's important for us to know about our past. Critical race theory, as far as I know, being a teacher in Gilbert Public Schools, is, I don't believe that that's part of our curriculum. And so I haven't learned everything about it, but it hasn't been the greatest concern to me because it's not considered part of our curriculum in Gilbert Public Schools.
Okay, great. I was wondering, if elected, what is the first bill that you would introduce?
That's a good question. Well, going back to education and how I'm so passionate about education, public education, and making sure that the needs of every student are met. I have some feelings about how charter schools may not have as much transparency as the public schools are required to have. And they may not have all of the same rules and things that public schools have. So I think that it's really important to have choice. And I don't want to discourage that, but I do think that we can make a more level playing field for public schools and charter schools, that we all kind of work by the same rules. And so I think that would be one of the first things that I'd love to look at.
Great. I'm going to move out of education a little bit to say that Gilbert is a growing city and Arizona is a growing state. So our housing costs have been rising. How would you address affordable housing? Would you address affordable housing?
That is a really good question. And it's not only just a regional problem or a problem in our state, but I feel like we're having problems across the nation with that. And so as I've researched that, I've tried to look for some examples of people who are trying to address that in their states. And I did find an example that in Denver, they call it the Denver Affordable Housing something, and it's a plan to make affordable housing available to those who are in need, and it gives a better capital pool to pull from so that we can support that affordable housing. And so I think that as we look around, we can probably find some examples like they have in Colorado, and try to do some things that would better help our population.
All right. And another big issue on voters' minds has been the border and how we're handling that. Title 42 has been in the news recently. What are your thoughts on the border? Would you support finishing the wall, and what would your other plans?
Yes, well, that is really a big issue, and people are worried about that. So I definitely think that it's a good thing for us to think about and to work together, but I think that we need to be working with our federal government, whose responsibility it is to secure the border. And so I'll be reaching out to those people at that level so that we can discuss our needs. But what we can do is we can make sure that those areas that are right there on the border, that they have support that they need to fund enough sheriffs or enough materials or whatever it is that they need, so that we can make sure that Arizona is a safe place and that we're doing our part to keep it that way.
Great. And earlier, I think you had mentioned part of the reason you wanted to run is that there's been divisiveness, there's been discord. Do you want to work across party lines? Would you work with Democrats, or do you want the Republican Party and the Republican Party alone to get along with one another better?
That is definitely one of the reasons why I'm running. I think that we can all do better to listen to each other and to learn from each other and to come up with the best solutions for our state. I think that there is good in both parties. And so I think that we can really learn from each other, and we can try to come up with the best solutions. I noticed a quote. Helen Keller said, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." And so I really like that philosophy, that as we're working together in a civil environment, that we can get things done. I think sometimes we get really stuck on ideologies that keep us from being flexible at all. And while it's important to have our values, I think that we can be flexible and give and take on some of these things so that we can actually accomplish things.
All right. It sounds like maybe some bipartisanship then.
Yes.
And you also talked about water, which is sort of a bipartisan issue. So let's talk about water conservation. What specifically would we be doing if you had the power to pass some laws that regard?
Yes, well, we're not really to that point yet where we need to have the laws for water conservation. But when we get to that point where we need to do that, there could be some limitations on the size of our lawns we could also promote using that recycled wastewater. As I've been learning about this, I read about the nuclear plant. Okay, I'm blanking out on what it's called. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about, that nuclear plant, but they use wastewater, and they use millions of gallons of wastewater to cool their plant. And so I think that's a great example of how we can conserve. We can also use it for irrigation. So we need to look a little deeper on how we can make the best use of our recycled wastewater. And I think that we can make a difference.
Okay.
And now I'll say it, Palo Verde Generating Station. That's what it is. Sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Oh, no worries. So does that mean you believe in climate change? You don't believe in climate change?
I think that I do believe in climate change, that humans are having an effect on our planet. And so I believe that we are stewards of our planet, and it's our responsibility to take the best possible use of what we've got. And of course, we've got to still live our lives. We're humans, and we have to do things. We have to drive our cars, but maybe we can make better decisions about how we do things so that we can preserve this beautiful place. And Arizona is such a great place. We want to continue to have it be a lovely place to live.
Yes, I think it is. I'm getting another question from a viewer here. It is, what would you do at the state level to help with mental health?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I don't feel like I have a real expertise in that. And so, of course, I would turn to others who have studied it more. But as a legislator, as we're looking at budgets, of course, we'd want to make sure that we're supporting efforts to help those who are in greatest need. And I think these days, as we've been, we're recovering from the pandemic, and there have been so many people who are alone and dealing with anxiety or depression. It's a lot more common, I believe, these days. And so we need to make sure that people have those resources that will help them so that they can live productive lives, they can be productive citizens, and that just helps all of us. So I think it's a win-win if we can help those people.
Sure, and you did mention earlier that there's a lack of funding for students with disabilities in schools, and that you want to correct that.
That's true. Our school systems really are creative with their funding that they get, so that they make sure that they do the very best that they can with the money that they do get. But if we were fully funded, then we would have more money to raise teacher salaries, or to make sure that we have current textbooks, or whatever the case may be. So it kind of takes away from what we can do. So yes, definitely we need to make sure that those needs are met, and do the very best things for our marginalized students.
Since we're back on education, I'm going to give you another education question, which is coming from a viewer.
Okay.
It's about your incumbent opponent, Representative Grantham. It says he voted against the school aggregate spending limit in February. What are your thoughts, and how would you have voted? And that is referring to raising the aggregate expenditure limit on schools.
I'm glad that you asked that. Every one of our representatives and our senator voted no on that. And this is money that was already allocated to our schools. It meant that there would be huge cuts in the last quarter of our school year. Things that were discussed as possibly coming about are shortening our school year for our students, not having substitute teachers, and maybe stopping our bus services. And so I think that was really the wrong message to send, to vote no on that. I think that we need to take a look. Probably next year we'll come up again to the same thing. This was set in the 1980s and has never been increased. And so this is a problem that we can solve. We just need to come together to make it more reasonable, so that we're not making it hard for our schools as they're trying to do the best for our students.
Yeah, and to clarify, we did raise the aggregate expenditure limit for this year, but it was only for this year. So that means that we would have to do a more permanent change unless we want to be voting on this perennially. And you're saying that we need to address that.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Let's change it.
You know, it's part of what's interesting about this, though, is that the Democrats were more in favor of making a permanent change and the Republicans were not.
Yes, as a party, the Republicans are so concerned about using our tax dollars, and I agree with let's be good stewards of the money, but also we need to make sure that we're making good investments. And so I think that our kids are the best investment we can make for the future. And so I would be willing to make some changes in that way.
Right, so we're down to our last 5 minutes here, and I want to talk about elections a little bit since you are running in an election. Do you believe that Donald Trump won the presidency? And do you believe that we need more regulations on elections?
I believe that President Biden is our president, and from everything that I can see from the courts and all the investigations, it seems like there is not evidence to show that there was fraud in this election. I do support measures if there's something that we can do to make to have more integrity with our elections. I'm not opposed to that, but I also want to make sure that it's not something that would make it harder for some of our citizens for voting. So I think we need to be really careful as we look at that. We want to have confidence in our elections, but we also want to make sure that all voters have the capacity to vote and that we don't make it difficult for anyone.
Do you think that makes you moderate? Do you think that makes you too much of a progressive in Arizona these days?
I think that I probably disagree with some people, and I am a more moderate Republican. That is true.
Okay. And I have another question here from the viewers, which is, how can Arizona attract high-paying jobs?
High-paying jobs? Well, we've got to make sure that we have a business-friendly environment so that businesses want to come into Arizona and Gilbert, into our area. And so we've got to make sure that we're able to support those businesses. Got to make sure that there's enough water. We've got to make sure that as they set goals and reach them with their tax dollars and their employees, that we can offer a tax break to them because they're contributing to our tax base. I think we can do some of these things to make it a very business-friendly area. Also, one thing, going back to education, sometimes when businesses are looking to relocate and they're looking at Arizona, they look at the funding per student, per pupil, and they see that we are at the very bottom of the list of our states. And so sometimes that takes people away from Arizona because they don't think that education is a priority, and that's important to everyone. So that would be another way that we could get more business into Arizona to properly fund education.
And Speaking of taxes, we've been having some inflation and there have been some high gas prices. Arizona has a tax on gas that is used to fund infrastructure. Do you think that we should be suspending the gas tax or increasing it, or neither?
Well, that is the way that we keep our roadways sustainable, and how we fund keeping good transportation in our state. So since it is not just an issue that we're having in Gilbert or in Arizona, it's really a national issue. I think that it might be short-sighted to suspend that tax on our gas right now, because we want to make sure that we're able to continually have the transportation needs that we need. So I think that we need to be more proactive on reaching out to our federal officials and our business leaders and everyone to come up with better solutions for those gas prices, for our economy overall. Let's work together to do the best things.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think we're just about at the end here. Do you want to give a closing comment?
Okay, thanks so much, Cameron. Well, I hope that those who are viewing will just remember about me that I want to be able to listen to you, to hear your ideas and answer your questions. I'm a little bit curious as to why I'm the only one that's here to answer the voters' questions. And so I want my constituents to know I'm here for you. This is a thing that I've been nervous about, well, all week, because I'm not really used to doing something like this. But I'm showing my vulnerability, and I'm showing that I care about the constituents and what happens in Arizona by actually showing up so that I can listen to those voters and so I can answer questions. And that's what I hope to do as I serve. I want to listen, I want to learn from you, and then I hope that I can lead out with taking some action so that we can make Arizona, Gilbert, all this area a better place to live. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight.
Thank you. And I speak for myself, and I think Clean Elections when I say that I'm glad that you came. So this concludes our Q&A, and to Mrs. Lunt, thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the August 2nd primary election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is July 5th, and early voting begins on July 6th. All registered voters, including independent voters, can participate in the primary. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron.